Today we're interviewing Joy Ellsworth with Clement Waters. Hi, Joy.
Hi, Bob.
So tell us a little bit about your background. How did you become interested in the environment and climate issues?
Personally, my both of my parents were, I guess, hippies. My dad had long hair. My mom, believed in the women's lib movement, and that happened when about when I was born. But as I grew up, I also got to learn from both of them that it wasn't just them that believed that the earth is worth taking care of and can help us more than we realize. It was actually our families. So my grandfather in Eastern Tennessee um, taught my dad and me kind of what to recognize in the world around us to know how many snows you're going to have in the winter, or when to plant your root crops versus your leaf crops, and what plants planted around each other are beneficial for each other. And my mom was kind of a first, she was one of the first readers of Mother Earth news when it first came out. She was like a definite fan, and she learned from it, but it resonated with her because her family had also grown their own food in northeastern Texas. And so when we were growing up in Dallas, we grew our own food and we canned, and she also made us recycle. She made us learn why recycling was important, why water conservation was important. So I just grew up with environmental and climate issues on the brain. Just didn't want there to be a time in the future when we all have to wear environmental suits when we leave our front door to go
Of course.
someplace. Yeah.
So it sounds like you just kind of grew up in that environmental thing. It sounds like you moved around. I mean, Tennessee, Texas, Missouri, Kansas areas.
Yes, in fact, I went to high school and college in Kentucky.
So you've seen a lot of the Midwestern areas, and
Yes,
I would guess see how climate's affecting those.
yes,
So as the climate issues, I mean, obviously growing up as people connected with nature, with the environment, with gardening and such. Have you seen climate issues become more to the front, more forward on your consciousness in the last decade or so?
yes. USDA growing zones are changing. So plants that used to work in a location aren't going to be aren't going to be as reliable to grow. And that's really important for people who are growing traditional foods and want to continue growing heirloom herbs and medicines and foods, because what they grow, it changes based on what can grow in a place. And so that's definitely changing. But also trees and forests are very much important to my family background. Um, but then that's for the peace that you feel in a forest, but also for the quality of air that forested areas present for us. And that has been changing. The amount of forest that's available has been changing, not just due to human activity, but due to the climate change that has been caused by human activity.
Kind of a vicious circle there.
Yeah.
So that kind of brings us to Clement Waters. Tell us about this group.
Well, my husband and I founded Clement Waters when, I had known from growing up that nature has a role in our mental and physical health and nutrition. But my husband, Luke, discovered after fighting an autoimmune disorder for 10 years that when we had a chance for our lifestyle to change drastically because we moved for a job, a problem that doctors had been scratching their heads over for 10 years went away without medication. And it was when that happened, we were like, whoa, what happened? And the things that had changed in our lifestyle were proximity to nature, spending time in nature, fresh foods, eating fresh foods, whether that's vegetable based, or it was, some of our neighbors brought us fresh slaughtered meats and fresh milk. And the third thing that made a difference was supportive community. And that was something very surprising for me to find in the middle of nowhere where we had moved. So we formed an organization to basically make those techniques more well known to people who may feel isolated away from nature, who may not feel like they have access to fresh nutrition, and who may not feel like they have a supportive community around them and want to know how they can build that. So that's kind of what got us involved in Clement Waters as founders. And the end vision is to help there be more precious places where people can come away and ground and learn about how to reconnect with nature in a way that's accessible and achievable for their lifestyle.
So it's Clement Waters members, you're providing education, is it online, is it in person, how does that work?
Since COVID, it has been mostly online. And that was a difficult transition for us. And actually, that's kind of a reason it'll get us into the next, the last question about future plans. That is the reason that we are regrouping and trying to figure out how we can more effectively connect with people. And before COVID, we had seed swap living room meetings. And that looks like people coming to their friends or neighbors' house and meeting with us with our huge collection of like hundreds of varieties of food and herb and medicine seeds to talk about what could be done in the house or around the house that they were meeting in, so that they could learn how to analyze their own home and figure out what they can grow there. And then we swapped seeds, and at the time we had a greenhouse, and we set up swapping of seedlings when it was time to put the seedlings in the ground. And that was the start of our Homegrown Easy program, which is now an online instructional program. But before that, it was in person, and we'd like to get back to that at some point. We also have a 4-acre food forest that volunteers came to. About 600 volunteers between 2018 and 2020 came and established a walking trail in a 4-acre abandoned little bowl of property. It's all forested. It has a creek going through it. And the problem was that during white flight in the 1970s, contractors that were renovating homes there just dumped all of their renovation waste over the property line into this forest. And so those 600 volunteers were really, really instrumental in getting about 40 cubic yards of dumped waste out of the forest. And we took out about 50, 60 cubic yards of honeysuckle, invasive bush honeysuckle. And it turned that area from an overgrown, scary spot into a walkable trail that continually does need maintenance. So, so that's something that we're wanting to get the volunteer events back up. And the best thing about the volunteer events is that people who come to volunteer, they come to do something good for Kansas City communities. What they experience there is a peacefulness, because down in the bowl of the forest, it's about a 6-story tall property, and down at the middle of it, you don't really know that you're in a forest or in a city. You feel like you're completely immersed in the forest, and you don't hear the city around you. And so it's a wonderful immersive experience that leaves people relaxed when they go home from volunteering.
Is there a story behind the group's name, Clement Waters?
Clement is a word that means peaceful and healing, or peaceful and calming. And waters, to us, water has always been an element that brings healing and connection and helps people move forward into their lives after confusing or hurtful times. So those are the images that we wanted to bring into people's realities. So that's why we chose that name.
Sounds like a really great group. What brought you and the group to the Climate Council?
Well, so, we have a bunch of friends who are starting groups or have started groups over the years that are members of Climate Council. And we'd heard that we needed to join Climate Council over the years, but this past April, I was able to attend for the first time the climate event on Earth Day weekend, and at Unity Temple. That was when it was just very obvious because all my friends were in the room. And it was just obvious that I needed to connect to this group. And so we did.
Welcome. We're very glad to have you here. Tell us about your future plans. You kind of touched on that a little bit. You wanted to talk about the future. Where are you personally, and more importantly, where's Clement Waters going?
Yeah, well, so personally, over COVID was kind of difficult for us because there was a lot of isolation and a lot of, wondering what things were going to change in our lives. And I just kind of got tired of it about about the time that 2021 rolled around. I said, I need something that's going to enliven me. And one of my friends said, hey, go on this horse ride between Topeka and South Dakota. And I said, you're crazy. But she ended up getting me into it. And I met some really wonderful people who seemed like family to me. And looking into that feeling of why these people felt like family to me, and they were Potawatomi and Lakota people who were on this horse ride. It ended up because I myself have Native heritage in my family, and it's one of those hidden things that only is evident in our daily practice or in our traditions, our family traditions, and songs and stories and things like that. So I have been getting to know the realities of how nature is not there for many of the people who have Native heritage in the United States today, and America and North American continent, and that has seemed to resonate with me enough that it has gotten us into helping people nurture special nature spaces that are outside of the Kansas City metro. I didn't expect us to be moving that direction, but it seems that we are advising multiple nature spaces from multiple partners outside of the metro. And so that's kind of that's an interesting direction to be moving in that was not expected.
Clement Waters going to be moving back to more in-person events now that we're maybe moving towards the end of the pandemic?
Yes, thankfully we had a partner organization called Serve Kansas City, or Serve KC, that provided the lion's share of our volunteer labor before COVID. And of course, during COVID, they're 100% volunteer organization. They had to shut their doors, but they are back to being alive and well and running. And so we are figuring out what we need to do with volunteer coordination and training so that we can revive those volunteer events and start that going again.
Well, thank you. We're excited to have you as a partner and look forward to working with you.
I'm glad to be here.